Wear Spurs by James M. Morris. I feel compelled to begin this episode by addressing a common misconception that may exist about country boys generally. Since this show is called Short Stories of a Country Boy, and I happen to be that country boy. That misconception is that country boys have a birthright to be cowboys. That is simply not true. Let me assure you that at birth, I did not have an innate ability to communicate with horses, or some unique physical characteristic that shielded my posterior from soreness after a day in the saddle. I was not born preferring the smell of my horse over the sweet fragrance of a woman's perfume, or preferring sleeping outside on the ground under the stars on a bedroll amongst scorpions and rattlesnakes over the warmth and comfort of a bed in a house. Now, it is true that some of my earliest memories are of the sounds of roosters crowing at dawn, coyotes baying at the moon at night, cows mooing in the lots at the barn, a horse's nimble lips caressing my cheeks, and the pungent odor of cow manure. Those things would not make me a cowboy. They would not even make me a country boy. But they could lay the foundation for both. We routinely gathered the cattle into pens from the pasture to treat the sick, separate the heifers, pregnancy check the mature cows, and vaccinate for diseases. We also performed transgender operations on the unlucky males picked for fattening, for which there was no controversy at that time. All of these things were and are commonly done by cowboys. But growing up doing those things did not make me a cowboy. Now, our neighbor Buck, who lived several miles north, was an experienced horse wrangler who had worked on big ranches in New Mexico. He was one of the first horse whisperers. He used that technique to teach me how to break my first pony, a gelding named Brass, to be saddled and ridden without a bucking rodeo. During my preteen years, Brass and I saw many adventures, but Buck said he had some Shetland blood in him and lacked the athleticism necessary for a suitable roping mount. About the time I became a teenager, my father's registered quarter horse had a foal named Suzetta. She was a handsome, athletic horse that would be admired by the ranch hands in our area who knew quality horse flesh when they saw it. Buck helped me break her green to ride. For reasons I cannot explain, that is when I decided to become a cowboy. I embraced the idea completely. My metamorphosis into cowboydom lasted about 3 months. But that, as you will see, is somewhat misleading since I failed to complete the transformation. But that time period does accurately define the length of the journey. The first rung on the ladder to becoming a cowboy, in my mind, was to learn to rope calves. With Buck's help and Suzetta as my steed, I began the process of learning the art and training my horse. That process began with learning how to handle a lariat on the ground. I practiced by roping buckets, fence posts, dogs, my little sister, hay bales, mesquite trees, bank robbers, and runaway stagecoaches. I acclimated Suzetta to the rope and got her used to having me throw it all around from my perch on her back. We advanced to getting her accustomed to my handling the rope while she trotted and galloped. We even tried chasing calves around the pasture until my father saw us and put a stop to it. I decided I needed to experience the real thing, roping a real calf and tying him rodeo style. That is where the adventure begins and ends. Now, in our community, authentic cowboys were dime a dozen. I learned that most Saturday nights during the summer, an ad hoc group of experienced cowboys gathered at the Roaring Springs Rodeo Arena and had a competitive calf roping event. It was open to everyone. All they said you needed was a horse, a rope, and a tie string. I soon learned that you needed much, much more. Well, having practiced a lot, albeit without ever having attempted to rope a live calf, I decided I was ready. Boy, was I wrong. Confident in that mistaken belief, on a fateful Saturday night, I loaded Suzetta into the trailer and drove 10 miles to Roaring Springs. Sure enough, the arena lights were on and the trailers were parked all around it. I climbed on the top of the fence and observed how smooth these men and their horses came out of the gate, positioned themselves slightly behind the racing animal, and effortlessly threw their rope with perfect loop at the end that fell over the animal's head. The rope was swiftly brought taut as it was snapped by the rider and as his horse instantly planted both front legs in the soil and slid to a stop. The rider cascaded off the moving horse, raced to the roped animal, threw it to the ground, and in seconds tied 3 legs together. He instantly threw up both hands into the air to indicate to the timer to stop the clock. Without any commands, his horse walked towards the tied calf, putting needed slack in the rope, and greeted his rider. Then a man ran to the animal and untied the calf as the rider mounted his steed and moseyed back to the gate as he rewound his rope. He did not even lose his hat. These men had years of experience and some of the finest roping horses around. Their saddles were worn from practice and use. They knew every movement of their horses. As a well-oiled team, they had come out of that gate hundreds of times before. What made me successfully rope a calf at this event under these circumstances and not make a fool of myself? I was about to find out. One thing I observed common to many of the participants and those lounging on the fences was that they wore spurs. I had never worn spurs with Suzetta or any horse, but I had a pair, and for some crazy reason at that moment thought I needed them too. So I went back to the pickup and put on my spurs. They felt odd, but I thought they were necessary. When I returned, I caught the attention of a fella and asked if I could rope a calf. He looked at me with suspicion, but nodded his approval and directed me to a pen behind the chute. As I was mounting up, adjusting my equipment, and getting Suzetta backed into position, I could vaguely hear him tell some of the fellas around that they might want to watch the next kid. He looks green. I had some trouble getting Suzetta back into position about 10 paces behind the front of the chute where the calf is released. She was excited. She did not like putting her butt up against the wooden fence at the rear of the alley. The arena lights were bright. She had the look of fear in her eyes. I could tell by the way she continuously moved her ears that she was very nervous. There was unsettling commotion next to us where the calf was being prodded into the chute, and men were talking loudly. Gates banged loudly. Suzetta was clearly fearful and nervous. She was squirming, tossing her head, and nervously moving her feet. I shared her fear and nervousness, but without recognizing its impact on her. Big mistake. I pulled my hat down tight, positioned the tie string in my mouth, held the bridle reins in my left hand, ready to grab the saddle horn if necessary. Suzetta's skin quivered. Her shoulders were literally shaking. Her eyes were filled with terror. The stage was set for disaster. I nodded, and the chute gate sprung open with a loud bang as the man poked the frightened calf and hollered, causing the poor animal to bolt forward. It startled me, and I instinctively kicked my heels into Susetta's trembling ribs, forgetting about the spurs. But it was too late. Susetta's reaction was immediate and dramatic. She bolted from the short alley like a rocket blasting into space. Her first leap was forward and upward. She cleared the end of the chute for the first leap, landed gracefully on her front legs, and kicked her hind legs higher than my head. She bounced straight up into the stratosphere on her second leap and kicked forcefully, albeit gracefully, at the summit of her jump. By that time, we had already passed the calf as he ran for his life. Susetta twisted as she made her third leap, kicking sideways while propelling her athletic body forward. I had grabbed the saddle horn by the time we hit the ground after the initial leap, while my right hand rose high in the air with the rope unraveling with each buck. I stayed on her for 5 or 6 leaps until she popped her rear end forward and upward as she dipped her front end down and backward and sent me flying over her head. By that time, we were already at the center of the arena. A somersault later, I finally returned to earth with a thud, followed by the rope cascading down around and on me. My hat was half buried in the dirt, with a hoof print gracing its crown. The tie string was still clinked tightly in my teeth. The first thing I saw as I raised my body from the dirt was a cadre of cowboys at the end of the arena, laughing so hard several had fallen off the fence on which they were seated. They were laughing and pointing, even as 2 of them came to see if anything other than my pride was damaged. Before they could get to me, Susetta innocently arrived to surveil my circumstances by walking calmly up and putting her soft nose on my cheek. That increased the laughter in the audience twofold. I looked into Susetta's forgiving eyes and asked for her forgiveness. The group of onlookers finally calmed down and tried to make me feel better. They encouraged me to come back again and complimented the quality of my ride, saying jokingly, "We certainly saw her athletic ability." "She's a fine filly. You stayed on longer than anyone expected. That was a good ride. She lifted you into the clouds. Really impressive jumps. But you stayed put for 5 or 6 of them. That was a good ride, son. Saddle bronc riding might be your calling. Son, you don't need spurs with that filly." I thanked them for their support and took my wounded pride home, never to return to that arena again. When I got home, as my father surveilled my soiled clothes, dirty face, and crumpled hat, he asked me, "How did it go?" I knew from his expression that he had a pretty good idea. I said, "Don't wear spurs." With a sheepish grin, he said, "I could have told you that."